Welcome, James Bradley.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for coming. Please introduce yourself.
My name is James Bradley. I'm the UK and Ireland Commercial Director for Druid AI. We're a conversational AI business application platform.
Thank you very much. And you are a very experienced person in the software realm. And I want to pick your brain about how companies should buy their software stack, especially in the conversational AI realm. How should they do it?
I think it's really understanding exactly where you're at both culturally and technically is really important in starting that evaluation process. I've always thought that software has its place and selecting the right software is very important, but equally software has its limitations if you don't have the fundamental building blocks in place. So for example, I would always put data and people ahead of software. So if you don't have the data and you don't have the right people, you're never going to be able to sweat the software asset. So it's really, really important that you understand where you're at in terms of your data assets and your people and their ability to actually make the most of the software that you're looking to evaluate or acquire.
And how would they go about, or a team how would they go about knowing if they have the right people and the right data?
I think that's where an engagement with a good consulting team makes an awful lot of sense. Then that could be for large enterprises. Maybe it makes sense to team up with one of the big global SIs, but there are plenty of boutique consultancy firms out there in the marketplace as well that have an awful lot of experience maybe in the area that you're specifically looking at addressing from a software or an analytics perspective. So I'd encourage them to assess assets or options for engaging with a boutique consultancy firm. Obviously, there's a huge amount of information available now via the internet. From a software sales perspective, the thing that I think has really changed massively in the last 15 years is a salesperson, I would bring information to you as a customer. I no longer have the option to do that. Invariably, when I come to you, you know nearly as much as I do about my product, but you know an awful lot more than I do about the market and maybe my nearest competitors. And so my ability to bring something to you, to tell you something you don't already know, is in some instances fairly limited. So really my role is about facilitating a buying process rather than trying to sell you something, really. So I think that obviously, so again, engage with the consultant, do your research. There's a plethora of information out there available, and understand exactly where your key objectives and key drivers are. Do you really need the very best piece of software? Back to the point, I think most organisations, in my experience of 30 years of selling software, is most organisations will only ever sweat about 70% of the software asset, but they'll spend an awful lot of time going to the nth degree, looking for, in an evaluation process, trying to find the right piece of software for them. Back to data, people, software. So I think pick your partners, pick your people. Invariably with a software implementation or even an ongoing maintenance and management of software platform or toolset is going to come across. You're going to come across problems. So does your software partner want to step up and help you solve those problems, or are they going to basically drop some software, send you an invoice, and then run away and leave you with the keys, trying to implement and trying to manage that piece of software? There's no shortage of those types of organisations that will smash and grab. So I would suggest, first of all, pick your partner before you get too worried about the nth degree of detail over features and functions. Of course, features and functions are important, particularly if you've got a very specific requirement base. But I think that's less important than picking your partner and feeling comfortable that there's a level of trust that when the going gets tough, your partner will be there to help you through it.
If you've never worked with this partner, how do you know that that partner should be your partner?
People buy from people, so I think most people are a relatively good judge of character. Most people will think they're a good judge of character. So trust your judgment, I think, and trust your intuitions. Number one, obviously you got to meet with them, you got to spend time with them. You could run POCs and pilots to get a sense of how comfortable you are working with that organisation before you necessarily make a full and firm commitment. Of course, you want to be talking to customer references where possible. Just note that no software vendor is ever going to give you a customer reference that's going to be a bad one, so you're not necessarily always going to get the very worst view or a very, very worst opinion. So just be mindful of that. But I think all of that is important as data points to throw into the mix. To me, the most important thing would be trust your judgment. I think in a sales engagement, who you want to partner with, who you think you can trust.
And if you partner up, how do you build that trust? How you keep that trust on the company side?
I think for a start, it's being open and transparent, and that's a two-way street. It's not just it shouldn't be a buyer and a vendor relationship. I think that's always going to be relatively limited. And if you want, as a customer, if you want to treat your partner as a vendor, then I think you're always going to be limited in terms of how strong that relationship is going to be. You need to be open both sides. You need to understand that the business that you are selecting is a business. It needs to make money, and you want it to make money because they want to continuously invest in their product and improve their product, and that's in your best interest. So it's not necessarily about trying to get the very best commercial deal that you can get out of that organisation. I think that's, depending on your budgets, that might be important. But yeah, be open, be transparent, be open about the problems that you're trying to solve for, your requirements, your business problems, because if you're not, then it's difficult for any software vendor to really put a proposition in front of you that addresses those business problems. So yeah, be as open as you possibly can and fall into a regular cadence. Too often, I think customers will acquire a piece of software, they'll go through the implementation and then not necessarily want to engage with that organisation until there's a problem. I think a regular cadence of interaction is really going to help, again, make sure that you get the most effective knowledge transfer process possible from your partner, from your vendor. And they're going to get a line of sight on potential problems coming up that maybe they've seen elsewhere that they can guide you through, rather than just, there's an issue, there's a red light, we need to fix it, and everybody needs to run around crazily trying to fix it. So yeah, keep the dialogue cadence open and frequent.
Now we see a lot of chatbots around that are not so good.
Yeah.
We know in some instances that's because it turned out they chose the wrong software. How should these companies go about to go from what they have now to something better? How should they do that?
Too often the software gets blamed for a problem. I think so. The first question is be open and honest with yourself with regards to is the problem with the software, or did you try to fix the wrong problem with the software that you chose? Did you approach it in the right way? A lot of the times with an automation program, whether it be chatbots or any other form of automation, it's a cultural shift. Change management is as important as anything. So you need to understand how to take your organisation on a journey to embrace it. There's no point deploying software technology and then not embracing it across the organisation and then just pointing the finger and blaming the software because it didn't solve your particular problems. So be open and honest with yourself with regards to why you selected the software, the nature of the problem, and was that software really fit for purpose? And again, engage with the software provider as well, because you might find that actually the way that you've deployed or the way that you're managing it isn't getting the most out of the software. Assuming you've done all that and it still turns out to not be the right software, then it's just being honest with yourself with regards to the impact of that change. Very rarely are you going to have a situation where you can easily shift from one software technology to the next. It's often going to be at least an element of rebuild, and maybe even throwing out what you've had in the past, throwing it out and starting from scratch, and that's the reality of that pivot. But if you understand the limitations of that software over the next 3 to 5 years, for example, and you understand what that's going to cost your organisation or the cost of doing nothing, then that in itself should help you write a business case for implementing a piece of technology that it is going to solve the problem, is going to help drive the benefits that you were hoping to realise in the first place. But it's not easy because it requires people come with egos, people come with personalities, people come with not wanting to admit failure. And it's not always easy for someone to admit they made the wrong decision. So invariably, you're going to come across somebody that is wedded to the decision that was previously made, even if that was a bad decision. So there's some politics and personalities to managing that process. So it's never going to be easy, but the business can't move forwards if you're not prepared to ask difficult questions and make difficult decisions.
And what's the role of change management in all of this?
I think, well, again, it's embracing. So if we take chatbots and automation more broadly, there's a lot of people that are going to assume that the technology is there to replace their jobs. or to shrink their function. So if you're a manager of a function, maybe you validate yourself by the number of people that you're managing and how big your department is, and you see automation as potentially compromising that. And it shouldn't be that, and it doesn't need to be that. Really, what automation is there to do is it's there to take away the less cognitive functions that more often than not people don't enjoy doing anyway. It performs them better, faster, more reliably, more consistently, and it allows you to repurpose your skill sets elsewhere. That may be some retrenchment, it may be some right sizing the organisation is required, but at least what it's going to give you is a function which is higher performing from a cognitive perspective and perform the functions that the technology cannot. So change management is about embracing the value of automation, not being too precious about what that's going to have in terms of an impact on yourself, and being open-minded with regards to where you can then take that technology to build the profile of your particular function in that business over a period of time.
It sounds like you say change management is more a mindset than a function.
Yes, I think it absolutely is, but I wouldn't underestimate the importance of change management. I've seen very mature organisations, very robust organisations block the true adoption of technology and the true benefits of technology because people didn't want to embrace it.
And what was the final impact of that not embracing?
The finger pointing at the software doesn't do what it was meant to do. People move on in jobs, maybe the sponsor of that software moves on and the people that come in don't really see the value of it. And often that software will then under-deliver on the original business case, and ultimately over time it'll be seen as a failure and it'll get replaced by something else and they'll start that cycle again.
So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It is. I think it absolutely is if you allow it to be, yes.
That is a scary thought, actually. We know it's happening a lot. But back to chatbots and conversational AI and the chatbots we see out there. How would you go about, if you're a company starting off with zero, how would you go about finding out the actual requirements you need? Because you said something about soul searching and really understanding the problems. How would you or define the steps you would take from start to finish?
Okay. I think what chatbots and conversational AI has allowed us to do is to engage with the customer in a way that obviously people had to do in the past. And that's very, very difficult to scale your organisation. So it's high cost, it's fraught with error. More often than not, most people can only communicate in one or two languages. The software is allowing us to communicate in multiple languages, hundreds of languages in some cases. It's enabled us to converse at 3 o'clock in the morning when your call centre obviously is not. So there's a lot of, in terms of delivering a customer or an employee experience and that sort of 24/7 accessibility, there's a huge amount that software can do. But you need to be able to listen and understand. And there's a lot of conversational AI solutions out there that can do that well. I mean, again, you need to understand how well their natural language understanding or programming models work. Named entity recognition. So if you're trying to categorize the request to pass it to the right function, obviously every single platform is going to have their own capability and perform differently in an environment. But I think there's some good technologies out there. But then what do you do with that information? So you've listened to the customer, you've been able to converse in more of a human-like way than maybe technology's been able to do before. And I think that's important because as human beings, we want to feel like we've got an engagement with a human as much as possible rather than just technology. So I think the more human-like that engagement from the technology is, the better. And I think that's important in your evaluation. But once you've got that information, you understand exactly the nature of the request. What are you going to do with that? You need to make some kind of a decision. And then once you've made the decision, you've got the insight from that information, then how are you going to act upon it? So I think it's more than just the listening and understanding, which a lot of conversational AI tools can provide. It's more than how you're going to interact with other applications or within that tool, actually deliver on the decide and act. So the ability to bring in predictive analytics to make a decision, a next best offer or a next best action, whatever it may well be, and then to be able to execute on that effectively, that gives the right customer or employee experience, but equally minimises back office administration.
I hear you say next best action, next best offer. Are you referring to going from a conversation to a transaction?
I think invariably when people call into most businesses, there is a transaction at heart. It starts with a conversation, but ultimately it's going to end in a transaction. Whether that be I want to update my account, or whether that be I want to make a complaint, or whether that be I might want to reschedule an appointment, ultimately it comes down to a specific purpose and a specific transaction. How I ask for that and how I understand exactly what I want to ask for and why, that's where the technology can help take the customer on that journey and ideally lead them down a particular path which is good for the customer, but also it's something that the organisation can manage effectively.
And who should be the owner within the organization, or the ambassador in the high level, in C-level?
There lies the challenge really, isn't it? So ultimately, software implementation is going to be owned by technology, it's going to be owned by the CIO and CTO invariably, but really the beneficiaries of the business. And so I think you need to have a relatively broad stakeholder approval, and I've seen it too many times. So you can sell into the business, and then technology will say, oh, that's conversational. We use something, we use IBM Watson, or we use this. And that doesn't necessarily solve what the business needs it to solve, but there'll be an IT architect somewhere in the business that says, oh, we've got something else at an enterprise level that will do that. And the business then starts to get corralled in a direction that they didn't want to go in. So I think it's important, stakeholder management in that scenario is really, really important, not only for the software supplier, but also by the business owner that's ultimately trying to solve a problem.
And what advice would you give the business owner how to pitch to their board that they actually need whatever they need, and not what the tech people are offering?
Again, understanding what you already have. So start the journey with understanding what you already have in the ecosystem. Our view will always be use and reuse what you already have wherever you possibly can. So if you've got some conversational capabilities in the business, start with understanding that. Will that solve your problem? If it will, line of least resistance is to engage with the IT teams and help to engage with that particular software vendor to build and develop and deliver a solution for you. If it doesn't understand why, and then understand how important that is, and it could be as simple as a classic 80-20 rule. You've got to pick your battles in life and certainly in business. So you might have seen some software with some specific functionality you think is really quite cool, but does it really make a huge amount of difference for you? Do you want to die in a ditch bringing a new piece of software in for the nth degree of functionality which you may or may not really ever realise full value out of? So I think understand what you already have, understand the as is, understand the to be, understand where the gaps are, and then evaluate the market to see which solution out there is going to best suit your needs to fill the gap, and which partners that you think are going to help you in building and maintaining and running that end-to-end solution and architecture.
Thank you very much. This is very, very helpful.